Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Testing Peers. Tonight we're going to be talking about conferences and what that means to us and how that can impact us at work and our colleagues as well as part of that. Tonight we have some substitutes for the main people, apart from myself, David, and also Russell.
Hello.
We have joining us tonight Beth.
Hello.
And Steve.
Hi everyone.
So as part of the Testing Peers, we are really delighted to be sponsored by Saffron QA. Saffron QA is a specialist in testing recruitment, offering permanent, contract and a newly developed retained recruitment service. More details can be found in the show notes, or please reach out to Ben directly to find out more. As with normal practice, we start with a banter, and tonight Beth has agreed to present it. So Beth, what have you got for us tonight?
I have, and we're without Simon and Chris's fine seam of banter tonight, so I'll do my best to step in. So we're going to be talking all about conferences, maybe testing or otherwise, but certainly a focus on testing, I guess. What I was curious to know is, what's the funniest thing you've ever seen at a conference? Who wants to go first? David, do you want to kick us off?
Oh, I'm just trying to think. Funniest thing.
This is where Chris and Simon come in handy. They're much faster.
Yeah, you haven't chosen necessarily the best people. Russell and I's memories are quite poor in this, remembering things.
Well, I've just come back from Test Bash over in Manchester, Test Bash UK, and it was quite funny seeing Vernon Richards and Stuart Day decide to do the dance from the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air dance. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah, that was very funny, doing that on stage. There were quite a few moments where people were trying to demo stuff that didn't work. That always seems to get a laugh. Yeah.
They're not doing Macarena as well? Or that was someone else?
Oh, yeah, we all did that. The whole Massive Theatre did that. Everyone got involved, which was great. And good on Lavina for getting everyone up and off their feet. So that was very good.
I do remember one of the test bashes when Vernon was in a tutu as well. But another thing was, it was less funny, but more sort of embarrassing. I remember one particular talk at a conference where the presenters were just trying their best to present without notes and not achieving it very well. So it was much more embarrassing and you're wishing it was over. And every so often they would look at their phones to check their notes. So why they didn't have their phones out all the time. It was just, so it wasn't really funny, but it was a bit cringy.
Memorable, for not for the right reasons. Steve?
Just trying to think back. I went to one in Birmingham years ago. We're going back sort of 9, maybe 10 years. It was at a university hall. And it was a talk around about software testing at the time. So it was a testing talk. And they could not get the microphone to work. They couldn't amplify the voice. And it was the usual thing, people running around on stage. But in the end, this chap on stage started doing magic. He was going around to people, entertaining people by doing magic. And I just wanted to see more magic by the end of it. By the time the mic came on, I just wanted to see the show. But that was probably one of the best conferences I ended up going to be honest.
Oh, can you imagine having magic tricks in your back pocket to be able to
pull out? It could have been set up, but it was fabulous.
It does sound like awesome. A good backup plan, doesn't it?
It does.
Maybe I'll have to learn some magic just in case.
Yeah, plan B.
To be honest, I can't remember anything that funny other than I think on one occasion where someone was trying to ask a question, and even though there was a person with a mic trying to give them the mic, literally stood next to them, they just wanted to shout. They didn't want to use this microphone. They just wanted to shout. And they weren't very good at shouting, as in they weren't that loud. So no one could still hear them. So everyone, the stage, the guy with the actual mic shouting back, used the mic. And it was just kind of went on for about 30 seconds, which doesn't seem like long, but in the middle of a conference and questing, it's amusing. And everyone's kind of just like ducking their heads and kind of
there's that moment
to laugh.
Of awkwardness, isn't there?
Yeah, exactly that. And it's that moment of just back on the mic. And it's like, you are the furthest part away and there is someone next to you with the mic who's now looking embarrassed as well because you're not taking it. It's just, so it wasn't technology, it was people. But sometimes people do make life hard for themselves.
We've all been on those calls where someone says something and there's a pause, and the pause seems to last the duration of a film, and you're just desperate for Beth to say, please, someone say something.
Good news is we can edit them out on a podcast.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so conferences. we are kind of in it's sort of at the beginning, correct me if I'm wrong, but sort of at the beginning of conference season when it comes to testing conferences. So I know there's a very popular kind of newsletter that goes out with all the upcoming testing conferences on there. There's a hell of a lot going on in October, November. So I didn't realize that there was kind of a season for software testing conferences, but there is, I think. Is that still the case now that things are online?
I think so. I think there's two, though. I think there's the October-November period. I think June has become crazy with a few different things now. There's quite a few in June as well. But yeah, the October-November time does seem to be conference season.
What's on your conference kind of bucket list? If there's anything you've not yet been to, what's up there for ones you'd love to go to?
It's a long list.
Yeah. I'd like to start going to a few more DevOps conferences. The DevOps conferences for me, I think they are a very close cousin or sister of testing conferences in general. I think software engineers and testers should be attending as many DevOps conferences as possible, because that really is a relatively new domain and skill set. And you'll be amazed at the crossover from what I would call application delivery and software testing conferences. It's almost like the hub is in DevOps conferences at the moment. So a lot more of them are on my agenda, that's for sure.
So
I went to the UK US Star, but I'd like to go to the proper US Star. That's probably on my bucket list to try and get there at some point and just get to more conferences, basically. I've missed out through COVID and for various reasons. So I'd just like to get back to some.
Yeah, I'd love to go to an international one. I've not yet been to one outside of the UK, and that's definitely up there for me. I think there's so many to pick from. I think it's amazing when I look back at how things were at the start of when I first started testing, just how many more people are kind of getting involved in the conference thing, really throwing themselves into it. It's really good. Have you got any, Russell?
Yes, Agile Testing Days is probably on my to-do list. I would like to go to, is it Potsdam? I can't actually remember. I'd like to go to that one. I think, am I right in saying there's testing on the beach, or have I confused it with something entirely different? Yeah, I'm not gone insane. That's fine.
That can't be in October, can it?
No, that's June.
I don't think it is. That's one of the June ones.
Definitely June.
But yeah, so I think those two. I've been lucky to go to quite a few sort of European ones. They are great. It's sort of a mixture of the cultures, different people, different perspectives. You get a different sort of atmosphere there. But yeah, kind of those two, I think, seem a bit more cultural driven, which seems quite interesting to me. So that's probably my list.
It's RoboCon next week as well in Germany. It was supposed to be a fabulous conference. It's not massive, but it's supposed to be a really, really good conference. I'd love to go. I had an opportunity years ago to go over to Germany, but I didn't go for some reason that is beyond me at this moment in time. But I hear really good things about RoboCon. It's supposed to be very technical and good fun.
I have to say, your point earlier about conferences testers going to, like DevOps and all the rest of it, there's so many different things beyond just pure testing ones. We should Agile ones, DevOps ones, development ones, personal ones, coaching ones, mentorship ones,
but also like PyCon as well, and other ones like that. They're
there's
really
loads.
useful. Yeah.
They're all really useful.
The problem is that actually, you say there's conference season, you have to pick, there's only a finite pool of money, and actually you can only pick or have the time to be able to go to some, one or two potentially. Certainly
for us, it's around about ensuring that the conferences that we pick, it needs to add value to what we're trying to deliver. I like it being driven from the team. I don't really like me saying, hey, look at this cool Test Bash conference or RoboCon or DevOps culture or whatever it may be. I love it when the team come to me and say, hey, Wobbs, look at this. Here's a use case. It's going to help us solve this. I always find they're the most valuable, and networking with industry leaders and being able to talk to them. It challenges on you on where you are as well. There's so many advantages of going to them in person, that's for sure.
That's interesting. So what are the kind of use cases that have swayed you to sign off someone to go to a conference then? Or what advice would you give for someone maybe trying to persuade their manager to spend that budget on a particular conference?
So there's two real key things that I'd like us to do in Matillion. One of them is to give us a presence externally as a company. So being around like-minded people is ultra important, networking for sure. But I think what we're trying to solve is we want to bring solutions to real world problems. So for example, if we're using Case 6, I think was at Test Batch, but that is a tool that we're using. Kafka is another tool that we're using. If there's conferences on that with industry leading experts, the information you get back to be able to then apply through your chapters and your guilds spreads that wealth. And so it's to solve common problems for us, that's for sure.
I'd say it's similar things. To me, it's that connection, the globalness or the localness, even sometimes, depending on what it is, but to get your name out there as well as being positive influence in the community, interested, knowledgeable, but also to kind of help you connect things. Like the reason I know Chris is Eurostar, things like that. And yeah, solving testing challenges, you can actually see obstacles and speak to other people that solve similar things, get ideas, bounce it back, get a peer relationship going, even if it's just for a 3 or 4 day period to help you do things. And it lets you explore new tech. Like you may never have heard of K6 before, or you may be using it, but it gives you an idea that you can then go away and do. You're probably not going to learn how to implement K6 brand new from scratch into a mature system. That's not the goal, but it'll give you the idea that there's tools out there. There are people that solve these problems. And that's inspirational to me often. It inspires me to know, it gives me this kind of like topping up effect of kind of inspiration, positivity, and like people can overcome some of the challenges you face. And it kind of inspires me and team members when they go. Usually it comes back, they're bouncing usually. And that's such a really positive atmosphere that then impacts the people and the teams they're working with. That's the value.
I also echo the fact that it needs to come from the engineers. It needs to come from them. That we can't do top down of you will attend a conference to go and choose it. It has to be. We've mentioned in previous episodes, passionate. People have to be passionate, be open to new solutions or new technologies, and as we've already said, bringing that back and sharing it, so therefore we can use it because. Again, we are investing in someone going to this conference. So actually then it needs to add value to what's coming back. And that value could be networking. It could be a tool. It could be an idea. But as long as it adds something and the investment is worthwhile, then absolutely it should be part. And that's part of the reason why it should be driven by the person. Because actually if the engineer chooses to go, then they're already enabling themselves to be that learning and that sponge to take in ideas.
I think a thing that I almost observe without having an agenda to do so is the trends. I'm going to conferences and I'm thinking, what are people talking about? What seems to be the things that people care about enough to get on stage and show other people? What are the best attended talks? What are the talks or workshops that get a room full of people really buzzing about it? What's the terminology that people are starting to use? So one of the themes at Test Bash, for example, was a real clear push towards quality engineering as a term, as kind of a job title, as a thing to aim for that hasn't been there before. Lots of talking about coaching that Dan Ashby had on continuous testing, for example, were just packed. The rooms were just absolutely packed out, and people were just really, really invested in learning more about that. And I think that's something, either realizing that you're on the right path and what you're doing at your place is right because it's what so many other people are kind of doing as well, or just getting that inspiration of why don't we try this thing because these thought leaders is what they're doing and it's working. So maybe we could adapt it for our use case.
I do think we have to be careful of bias, I guess, towards the thought leaders, as you mentioned. There's certain people that will fill a room regardless of what they say. And that doesn't necessarily mean what they say is actually of value. And we have to use a sort of sense check and a check against them. It's not saying it's not. Just because you're a leading voice doesn't mean your voice is better or anything else. And it's just sometimes we have to sense check these things, because I see a lot of rooms and conferences full just with the Dan Ashbys of this world, the Michael Boltons and so on. Sometimes it's who you are, and you've got that reputation for some things you've done. So don't get me wrong, it's not like you've got reputation for nothing. You've got knowledge, you've shared it, it's useful. But just everything that's said by somebody doesn't equal truth and greatness and etc. etc. So I've sometimes seen people come back from conferences try and, well, X said this, therefore it must be. It's like, okay, you need to actually understand the why, the context, not just apply something that someone with a great expertise said would work, but they described it in their situation and you've just taken it blindly into your world thinking it will solve everything. It's not quite how these things usually work. Yeah. There's some naivety of people sometimes. But yeah, I rant because I'm conscious of people just trying to take things and just use them identically in their own world blindly sometimes.
The thing about conferences is, to your point there, they take you out your comfort zone. So what Beth was saying there, they challenge you on where you are as a business. What is your testing journey? What is your quality engineering ethos? How far are you on your journey compared to company A, B, and C? And to your point there, Russell, you can't take someone's talk as gospel. if you're a 6,000 engineering strong company, delivering microservices and maybe monolith applications, and you're a startup, you wouldn't be applying a very, very robust testing structure over what you're doing, because it might be speed of delivery that you're after, or it might be contractual agreements why they deliver like that. So you've got to be able to just take it, digest it, and then say what works for us at this current stage. And I think testing strategies only last for about 18 months, especially if you're growing, before you move on to the next stage.
One thing I was going to say about, speakers and things is that actually often the keynotes and those thought leaders get people into the conferences. And it's a bit like musicians. Not every album is a classic album. And so therefore not all their speeches are memorable. And you shouldn't necessarily take everything they say as gospel. At most conferences, it's often those smaller, intimate, less polished people that actually have the best real world examples and something that can be taken away. Because again, taking the analogy of and musicians, it might be their first conference talk. It's been massaged, it's been thought of, it's their baby, it's their first time. And it's some of those nuggets that really can resonate, because we were all there once. We've all recognized that particular journey they're on, and can actually take a lot more away from those than the big names.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I think you've definitely hit on something there. You don't tend to hear as much about the fails at conferences as you do about the wins. There was a conference, I think last year, that was just called FailCon or something, and it was just about when things haven't worked. And for a lot of us, that is a repeated experience. It is something we have to go through, and we can get a bit blindsided by hearing constant success. I often think that's why it's great to sometimes go to the pre-drinks, or have some way of talking with people almost behind closed doors, or having a private conversation, because then you might get a slightly less filtered view on perhaps what their tool is like, if they're a tool vendor, or perhaps what their experience is like, and you can try and ask those questions to find out, is it really applicable to what I'm trying to do, or is it, I know Simon can get very frustrated with tool vendors whose tools will solve every world problem and solve everything in the world, and then you drill into it and it's perhaps not quite as shiny.
It's Excel with a shiny feature onto it, yeah. Or a CSV file import system, yeah. I agree. You hit on a good point there, though, about conferences as well, which was it's the events around them. So, like, there's the talks and other things, but it's the networking. It's the pub quizzes, it's the drinks, it's the lunches, the making use of all the other time. I went to, I think, UK Star or something, I think, a long time ago now, and took a team with me. Really involved with it. Because I took a team, though, that team struggled to do anything other than talk to itself. So there was like 5 people there, so all they did was stand around a table by themselves. Just like there was me going around talking to random people, and them standing kind of talking. It's like you're missing out on one of the key things, which is learning from other people. It's great that you're talking to each other. It's comfortable, but actually Joe Bloggs over there might be an interesting person to speak to, might help your career, might give you an answer to a problem that you didn't know how to answer. And that's one way of doing it during the event. But yeah, outside of it, over drinks, it's so much easier. I'll be honest with you. Drinks definitely make conversation flow better.
Being able to engage with people that you don't know and challenge yourself is a superpower. It's the biggest superpower that I would always, whenever there's any coaching going on for anyone in my team or my wider team, engage with people outside of the business, speak to them, because you will pick up nuggets in every single conversation that you have across business. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be a peer. It doesn't have to be a director. It can be a junior engineer. Having those conversations with people in other businesses sometimes drives the most quantifiable results or things you can do stuff with. So I would completely agree. Having that agenda to say, okay, I'm going to go to a conference, I'm going to go on my own because I want to go and network, is much more valuable than sitting around the table with your own team from your own company. There's no two ways about that. And it brings me to a question to you all, really. What do you think about virtual attendees now? Do you lose everything with that? What sort of percentage do you think you lose if you attend through a Zoom invite, for example?
I think you lose a lot. I've attended an online thing and they try to encourage people during the breaks, but actually staring at a screen all day is quite stressing and tiring. So actually during the breaks, everyone just disappeared off and did their own thing, because that's also what we're used to, in this particular thing. So I think it doesn't translate well into that coffee chat and things like that. And at lunchtime, it isn't. Who wants to see you stuffing a sandwich or a 4 or 5 course meal on a screen? It's just not going to happen. That doesn't, or hear you slurping your drink. It's just wrong, I think. And people want to escape. You want to escape the screen during those break times, not necessarily do it. So the online conferences are fantastic for sharing information, but they are not good at the networking.
Yeah, no, certainly when you're online, I don't know about you, if it's very easy to become, I think you said, fatigued, isn't it? Staying engaged, and you just see the person that is having the conversation, to your point, all that coffee conversation, coffee quarter, water cooler chat. The most valuable part is that sort of those little parts in between the talks, aren't they? Hey, how are you doing? Yeah. Russell, David, Beth, how are you doing? You don't get any of that, do you?
No. And also it's actually more difficult to switch, to go, it seems more rude just to go, I'm going to go to another room. You can't just sort of hope that someone comes and interrupts you, or you see someone and go, oh, I've just got to catch up with that. Online, you can't do that. So it's easier just to withdraw into your own space than have to endure someone who just likes to share, doesn't want to listen, has not got no interest in you, and just wants to tell you stuff. And that's very tricky. Whereas at least in real life, you can make excuses and, I've got to make a phone call. I can't easily do that online.
Yeah, I'm going to say, I agree with everything everyone's just said. Yay. Makes it easy. No, it's a different experience. You can learn things from talk still, but you don't get the full experience. I think it is kind of partial. So if you ask me, would I pay the same price for the same thing? I would say no. I'd pay a lot less for the kind of virtual, because the talks are great. And it gives opportunity for speakers around the world not to have to travel. There is lots of opportunities it can create, which is a positive thing. It isn't the same experience. The networking part of it is a very big part for me. And I'll go to meetups. I'll do online meetups rather than conferences, probably. I find that better as a mix, a couple of 1 talk, 2 talks, than a whole conference where it's day in, day out, glued to a screen. I know most of my day job's on a screen. There's something different about watching a screen, the attention it draws from you, that is just draining. And it isn't as pleasant. So I would definitely rather be in person at kind of a multi-threaded, multi-session type event, but more than happy enough to do 1 or 2 talks online. But yeah, after that, it just dies for me.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think it's also easier for you to be distracted when you're at a virtual event. Absolutely. by immediacy of, having your phone in front of you. So it's no one can see your camera. So you fiddle with that. And before you know it, you're not listening to the talk anymore, or to be interrupted by work. I have been to conferences that I've paid to go to, or work have paid for me to go to, and I've had to break off to go to a work meeting, or it's very, very hard to actually sit through a conference all day when you're at your desk and there's Teams there and there's people pinging you. Whereas a conference is it's a great test for a team, I think, when someone in that team leaves for a day or 2 for a conference. It's a really healthy thing for a team to have someone not there for a little while, and then to have that person come back and feed things back. I mean, how have you seen it done best with people that have gone to conferences? We talked there about teams going as a unit and staying as a unit, and that perhaps not being as effective as flying solo. But if you had a team that all wanted to go to the same conference, what sort of advice would you give them to get the most out of that and bring the most back when they come back, and how to disseminate that amongst the groups? So
for me, if a group was going, let's take, for example, a test bash, 3 of our wonderful engineers from our team just had the privilege of going, and they've come back and they've written a blog for us. So an internal blog, so we can disseminate that across the organization. And what we did was we had a meetup first. We looked at the events, we looked what was on. And there were some events that happened simultaneously. So having a group of 3 at that point, we were able to, one could go to one could go to another, one could go to coaching. And at that point, we were able to sort of prioritize, a bit like the JIRA backlog, and say, okay, which is the highest relevance and importance. So we're able to take that information, bring it all back to a centralized place, and then blog it across engineering. And that's the way we try to get success out of a lot of our meetups.
I think it's vitally important to share information once, as I said, we're investing in these engineers to be able to go there. So actually the information, they were privileged enough to go there, especially, you know, for certain conferences, there are only a certain number of places that companies can afford. So therefore, it's sort of almost picking your favorite children in order to go to the conference. But even though it isn't like that, but you have to pick a certain number of people. So therefore, you need to share that information with people that were not fortunate enough to be able to go to conference. And that could be just because they've got a family, because it's not convenient for them. It might be on holiday. Just because they weren't able to go, it shouldn't be removed from them that the information that was there shouldn't be shared. And what different, it's interesting taking different people to conferences because they each take different things. Even though this may seem the same talk, they will pick up on different things that is important to them. And actually, in that case, both are important because actually they might still be relevant in certain places in the actual workplace, because why did they sort of pick on those particular points? So sharing the information, that could be in a talk, it could be just the test group, it could be just to the wider company. It's vitally important to share that information as to how good the conference was.
Yeah. So on top of everything you just said, to me, there's also kind of like, I've spoken to the speakers afterwards. And sometimes the ones that kind of were really, really strong, that everyone loved or was really good feedback, I've tried to see if I can arrange to get them to come and speak. Not always, sometimes, but actually one of the best ways is the really good things, get them. Some conferences record them. And because you've got the ticket, you've got access to the recording. So you can share that sort of thing. Because as long as you're sharing it, usually that's fine. You can't download it and give it to somebody else, sort of thing, usually. Those sort of ways of sharing it, getting 10-minute lightning talks type things, share as your experiences, doing blog posts, do internal podcasts. I've never had one do that yet, but you never know. Maybe there's hope yet. But kind of giving a little build up, giving a little thing, teasing people almost, giving them an enticer to want to learn more about it, sharing their passion or their drive or why they found it good. And obviously, it doesn't work for every talk. So again, decreeing this is not necessarily a strong motive or way of doing things. But if you can encourage those who did see something they liked, who did take something away, to share in the way that suits them, it helps. Because obviously, team is diverse, you different things. But yeah, I think the one that I've taken away is being very nice and friendly and kind and generous to the speakers and saying, "Oh, that's a really good talk. We've got a community. Could we do something quick pro quo to kind of, get one of our guys to speak at yours, and could you come to ours?" And generally, a lot of people, apart from maybe the big names, who I've never approached, I'll be honest, are quite accommodating, quite friendly, quite open, want to share their message. So they're generally quite open to these little things.
That's an interesting point, because what I'd love us to be able to do with our maturity of our quality engineering practice is I would love the confidence to keep building. We've got wonderfully talented engineers, but we want to get them sort of exposed out there in the community. And then ultimately, once we're comfortable with that, we want to be up on the stage. We want to be able to talk about our practices. We want to be able to talk about our journey from where we've been to where we are at this moment in time to Unicorn. And we'd love to share that as well. So that's the space we're going to hopefully move into over the next 6, 12, 18 months. That's for sure.
Let me know.
Yeah, will do.
And if you want to practice at talks, I'm sure that there are 3 workplaces here and others that would be welcome to practice. Give friendly feedback.
There is so much quid pro quo that I see with that kind of internal speaking at internal events, because it does feel like a win-win, as long as you're not giving away proprietary information. Like going to speak at another company for their internal team is great exposure for you. It's slightly less scary than a huge conference, I would assume, and they get the experience of having somebody external, someone that doesn't necessarily know everything about their company. There's no politics there, and they can come in and give their expert opinion. I did hear one person recently say that their former workplace would not let them be part of an internal speaker as another company's internal community, and that was one of the reasons why they left. They just thought, you're not invested in me and trying to get me to where I need to be. But we talked there about encouraging people to speak and things. And I know I've been asking tons of questions tonight, but I'm genuinely very, very curious about how you all do this. What kind of advice would you give to somebody, an individual, or perhaps a member of a team from a business that's trying to drive it, about the different ways of contributing or getting involved in conferences? Is it all about speaking, or are there some other things that people could try?
So I guess I'll lead here. I got involved in conferences originally by volunteering. That's the way I got involved in it, because it was a cheap ticket. That was part of the logic. You got a free ticket, you helped out with doing it. So again, quid pro quo. You help out, you build the community, you got involved in it, you're part of the kind of slightly inner circle, which is always nice. And you got to explore things and do things. And it was brilliant. I've done it like 5 or 6 years now in a row. And I think it's brilliant. It gets you there. You get to speak to people. I'm nervously quite shy person. As much as I said that I want to go and speak to people, I do. I find people by themselves. I find it easier. But if you are part of the volunteering crew, it's almost the job. As soon as it becomes a job, to me, that doesn't make me nervous anymore. It's the expectation. So I find it a much easier way to kind of break that barrier, because it's kind of the T-shirt I'm wearing says I'm a volunteer. So everyone's okay if I come and speak to them. So it's a great way of kind of getting involved, especially if you're more nervous and shy. It's a great way of getting there where costs may be a challenge. And it's obviously a great way to kind of meet people. There's a community of the volunteers. If that makes any sense. So you've naturally got a group of people that are probably strangers who will work together. And that's a great way, I think, of getting involved and giving back. And, different conferences have different way of doing it. But generally, it's always giving you free access, which is always good.
I haven't actually been a volunteer at any conferences, but I can appreciate exactly what you're saying, Russell, especially the fact that obviously if you're volunteering, then actually lots of people will come and talk to you naturally because they want help. They want to know what's happening. And because you've got a passion for it as well, that will create connections. And so you're doing it in a professional capacity because you're helping out and you're giving back a little bit to the community as well by doing it. And also I think that it's a useful tool because you see what the people are like at that particular conference. And so therefore you can, if you have a passion to potentially go and do a conference, speak at a conference at some point, if you get to know what the tone of the conference is, what the message are, is it corporate or is it just a bit more relaxed? And so therefore you can have a better chance of having your abstract recognized as part of it because you have an understanding of what the audience is actually looking for as part of that. So it's a useful way to coming in. I would also say that going to a conference as well, and with that sort of idea is also a benefit to understand your audience as well. But it's you probably get more out of it as a volunteer.
Yeah, and it can be, it's good points there. And I'm just thinking they can be a bit of an overwhelming experience as well for if you're new to conferences. And you can be swarmed by recruiters. You can be absolutely swarmed by recruiters. Hey, have a free slice of pizza and come and speak to us. By the way, what's your email address? And I'm going to send you 400 jobs. And of course, everyone's just doing the job. But you can go there and you can lose value very, very, very quickly. If you get into the wrong conference and the wrong spaces, you almost like to need to mature yourself in conferences to say, okay, I'm going to go here. We're going to go and see this. Because there's a lot of great stuff at conferences and recruitment is fantastic. It's absolutely fantastic. But if you fall on the wrong side of the fence at a conference, you can quickly just make it all about, hi, are you interested in this role? Are you interested in this role? And I always think that's something just to be wary of. It depends what you're going for, what value you're after, but you do need to consider those sort of things as well. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's certainly true. Because there's such a big kind of range, isn't there? I've been to conferences that have been uber corporate, almost I just haven't felt comfortable. I wouldn't even go up to another attendee and say hi. They just felt really formal in sort of tone. And they're probably the ones that I'm least bothered about going back to, if I'm completely honest. I'll name no names. But yeah, I love a conference where you can actually go up to anyone and talk. And I think I've certainly noticed a huge difference in other people feeling that way at conferences post-pandemic, particularly when it's often people's first experience of being at a face-to-face conference, or certainly their first post-pandemic. They really, sometimes people don't realize how much they've missed that, just being in a room full of people who do the same job as you, who are just as passionate about it as you are. It is so infectious to kind of be around. It is energy zapping if you're an introvert. Can be super overwhelming. But looking back to the original question, I think a few other things that can maybe ways of people to get involved who might not want to jump straight into speaking. Lots of places let you review, call for papers, so you can see what other people might be speaking about. And that's maybe more of a behind the scenes sort of thing you can do. And then just, what David was saying about providing feedback, and Russell, provide feedback to the speakers, either on social media or, have a conversation with them, have a chat with them. One of the things that I think is brilliant is the Ministry of Testing do a 99-second talk kind of section at every event that they do. And the number of first-time speakers that have got up to speak for those 99 seconds, that was my first public speaking thing. You dip your toe in, it's over and done with in a minute and a half, and you can pat yourself on the back for having tried that public speaking thing. That's definitely something that I think I'd encourage people to just try, because conferences are amazing, but you get out of them what you put into them, right?
It's a very good point. And definitely. You generally are exhausted after them.
Yeah.
Every conference I've ever come back from, I've kind of needed a day's rest to survive. And on that note, maybe we should end this one here to give our listeners a rest. Maybe they want to listen to something else, or who knows? I don't know why. Maybe they want to look at our back catalogue. Anyway, thank you very much for joining us. Special thank you to Beth for joining us, and Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And obviously David, who joins us every week. So I'll not thank him too much. If you want to give us feedback, if you want to tell us your experiences of conferences, tell us about conferences you want to get to see, or anything else around the subject matter, please do reach out to us. You'll find us on Twitter or on Instagram. You can reach us at contactus@testingpeers.com. You should probably figure it out by now. Just look for Testing Peers, you'll find us somewhere, because we're pretty much everywhere these days. Thank you to Saffron QA for sponsoring us, and thank you once again to our brilliant listeners for putting us through to the end. So thank you, and we hope you enjoyed our conversation tonight.
For now, it's goodbye from the Testing Peers.
Goodbye.